Hey, good morning, guys. Today we'll be talking about an article that I read on BBC. So today we're not really talking about any scientific papers, but instead I was thinking of focusing more on other sorts of media. And I read this article on BBC on shale gas, and this article was published yesterday on BBC, and I've put up a link with the video to the article. So the article is titled "Ministers Shale Gas Hype." So basically, what the article is about, it's a report. It's a summary of a report from the UKirk, which is the United Kingdom Energy Research Center. It is a research center that constitutes 30 different academic teaching bodies. So you have professors and collaborators from universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, Leicester, Surrey, and things like that. So it's a report from UKirk which says shale gas in the UK is basically a hype. Now, coming from Canada, I view shale gas completely differently as to what the Europeans view it as, and more importantly, being here and going to some of these shale gas talks and how people view it in the United Kingdom, it's very different from where I'm from, especially if you go to Western Canada, such as Saskatchewan, Alberta, and things like that, where we have the second largest discoverable or technically retrievable reserve of shale gas. So that's quite interesting how the people in the UK view it. And this article basically says shale gas in the UK is a hype. And the main reasons why it says so is because of the Climate Change Act, and the second reason is, well, they say the recovery systems or the technology to retrieve shale gas from the ground is still at its infancy, and it will not provide enough gas to have any economic benefits for the United Kingdom economy. Let me first start with a small introduction on shale gas and what shale gas is. Shale gas is basically a naturally occurring gas which has been derived from obviously fossil fuel in the shale formations, which can be found at about a depth of 4 to 5 kilometers under the ground. And the way you retrieve shale gas is mainly through hydraulic fracturing, or as people say it in the slang term, fracking. As far as fracking is concerned, I've put up a link on the under this video on how fracking is done. It's a great link, a great animation, and it'll show you exactly how fracking is carried out in an oil or a shale gas well. Shale gas was first discovered in 1821 in New York, so this precedes the discovery of oil. Oil was first discovered, or the commercial, I should say, the commercial viability of shale gas was first discovered in 1821 versus oil, which was discovered in 1859 by Drake in Pennsylvania. So shale gas precedes the discovery or the commercial discovery of oil, and shale gas has been in existence since the 1820s. So it's been here for about 190 years. And so far, shale gas has not really reached such a peak or such a big hype like oil, mainly because oil has been an abundant supply. But as oil supplies dwindle, in the future, shale gas is probably one of the other fossil fuels that we're going to turn to. So, shale gas, in that 190 years that it's been present, there hasn't been a lot of technology or a lot of adaptability to retrieve shale gas from the ground, principally again because oil overshadowed it. But in the last decade itself, so from the 2000 to the 2010s, in the last decade itself, shale gas recovery has increased from about 2% to 50%. And this has been an advance in 10 years only. How I got this value, I've put up a link for that in my reference section for this video as well. You can see it underneath the video for that value increase. So in 10 years, it's increased from 2% to 50%. So that's a huge increase. And for the UK ministers, or not the ministers, sorry, the UKirk, to come in and say that shale gas technologies are still at its infancy and you can't really use it for any economic advantages, that's not entirely true, because within 10 years, you have had such a big increase, especially through things like multi-stage high horizontal well fracking and things like that. It's gone up by leaps and bounds. The other thing that's the big stop for the UK is obviously the Climate Change Act, which basically tells shale gas producers that all gas powered power stations has to be closed by the 2030s. So 2035, I think that's the date by which all of the gas powered power stations in the UK have to shut down. Well, given that constraint, shale gas doesn't have a lot of period or a lot of time to reach its boom or to reach its peak in the UK. So, if you want to make shale gas viable, don't focus on the obstacles that are being faced by shale gas. Focus on things like carbon sequestration. Obviously, the Climate Change Act says, okay, we have to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Well, how do you reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Well, you can look at sequestration technologies. You can look at how carbon is captured. And that's what Royal Dutch Shell is currently doing. Instead of focusing on things like, oh, how do you reduce energy demand and things like that? Well, obviously that's important, but if that's not under your control as a private company, what is? Technology, obviously technologies for carbon sequestration is. So if you go on the Royal Dutch Shell website and you look at Shell strategy for the next 50, 60 years, it'll say what it's doing and how it's doing it, and I've put up a link again for that on under this video. You can look at it later on, look at the animated strategy on what Shell is doing, and one of the biggest things it's doing is looking at how to sequester carbon and how to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. If you can't control what the energy demand will be, the next biggest thing you can control is what do you do with the emissions. So instead of focusing on closing down our power stations or things like that, look at technologies which can help people adapt. So that's for climate change. And as for you, Kirk, for a lot of people with a lot of educational background on shale gas, I'm sure they have reached a viable conclusion on the viability of shale gas in the UK. Well, in other countries in Europe, such as France and the Netherlands, the extraction of shale gas is completely banned. In the UK, it's not completely banned, but it's not reached commercial production yet. But in the future, because the renewable energy sources are so dwindling or so erratic, it's not able to cope up with the demand or the energy demand of the people. Because it's so erratic, shale gas might be the next best answer after oil. So instead of saying that shale gas is not viable at all, people from UKIRK saying it's just a hype, it's just what ministers want the citizens to believe, don't focus on words like hype and it's a lie and things like that. Focus on what can be done, because obviously in the next 20, 30 years, renewable energy may be a developing solution, but it's not a solution. It's not a complete solution. So looking at shale gas and looking at the advances that it's gone through, we can be looking at the next biggest fossil fuel boom through shale gas and through natural gas in the next few years. So with that, I'm keeping my video short this week. I realized last week it was very long. Hope you guys enjoyed it and see you next week.